Everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to be going over a individual named Carl Jung, and specifically maybe a little bit of reference to his Red Book. And we're going to see what kind of significance Carl Jung has brought to reality, the social sciences perhaps a little bit, or at least in the field of psychology, and how significant this man has been to, I guess, science in general and our way of thought. So you probably noticed a little bit of a scene change. I'm trying my best to do what is palatable, and instead of just looking at the closet that's right behind me, maybe we can look at something else. So we've got the Lord of the Rings on this side, we got my ode to C.S. Lewis on this side with the Aslan the Lion, and this painting right here, is called Your Sickle Awaits. And you can see there's people here that are lined up. Some have flames over their heads, some do not. So it's a kind of like an ode to the revelation. I got that when I went to Creation 10 years ago. My wife and I, and we're newly married. I think our first daughter was 2, something like that. So anyway, as I find more art to put up there, I'll put it up there. And hopefully make it look a little less tacky. The next step I want to do with the limited time we all have is try to get this camera instead of on the table, because whenever I hit the table for any reason, that happens, and it shakes back and forth, and it bugs the crap out of me. It probably bugs the crap out of you too if you're actually watching this. But anyway, let's talk about Carl Jung for a minute. This book, the Red Book, is significant because the family who is in charge of it was actually holding on to it for a very long time. I think it was released in 2016. So Carl Jung was born July 26th, 1875, and died June 6th, 1961. His lifespan passed over the century mark. Now, this guy was very interesting because he took religious thought seriously, which I think is pretty neat. And obviously Freud, if you studied anything about Freud, he basically went to everything phallic. Everything's all about sexual desire and urgency, and that's your agency in life. Well, in this book, it goes over a brief history of how this book came to be, and this guy wrote massive volumes. So before even cracking open this book and just knowing the massive amount that this person read and wrote about, I think kind of sings to the generations to come up, because that's one of the things that helps mankind develop and mature over the generations, is the concept that you study a lot, write all your stuff down so the next person can read it. Then they read it, they absorb it, they are you and themselves, and that's one of the ways that mankind as a species can mature. Some of the stuff that this guy studied, one of the reasons I went into it a little bit is he goes into mysticism and alchemy, which is actually kind of a little bit of the foundation of the band Tool, at least some of their theory crafting. They're making representations in their music, in the song The Grudge, they talked about choose 1 or 10. Well, that's the Kabbalah tree of life, and that's alchemic also in its origins. The 1 being the earth, the ground level, and 10 being the ultimate transcendence. They also make reference to Saturn. Saturn is the number 3. It's understanding, your initial understanding. And that kind of resonates with the psyche and how mankind has developed. You have a problem. The problem's holding you back, and that's the ground level. And then as you go up, you recognize you have a problem. You can choose to not fight it and just stay here on the ground level, or you can choose to have a greater understanding of it and try to overcome and continue. And that's kind of what reading some of the older books will do. Another reason why I got into Carl Jung is because Jordan Peterson is quoting him left and right. Maybe not so much Joseph Campbell, he's more my style. But if you really look up to somebody, and this is a lesson for anybody, for anything, if you look up to somebody, study them, sure, but study what they studied. Go back and try to absorb so much of their root history so you can understand the concept and where they're coming from. That's just a life lesson. But you can look at written language as part of mankind's development, because before that was oral tradition, and oral tradition can maybe be mistranslated or mistrusted or something like that. But now it's written down, and so you can look at it from an objective sense. Instead of being part of the tribe to get your oral tradition, you can read something that was written way over there centuries beforehand or something like that. Now you can glean that knowledge. That's pretty amazing. And it is part of mankind's maturity. I always theory craft that one of the reasons you can read about Eden, and this is theory crafting, right? There's no way you can prove this. But at the same time, it makes sense. When God cast Adam and Eve out of the garden, he put a cherub, which is also the Hebrew word for diviner. So there's a cherub there, an angel, a figure of God. And that's before mankind maybe even knew what fire was. So fire is just scary. And what does a sword do but separate? So you have the separation and the flames. And so before mankind could return to anything that looks like, or at least chase after the Garden of Eden, they had to get their house in order, and they had to at least learn how to deal with the jungle on the outside. And now that we've, mastered all the monsters, now that we can control our temperature, we can live in Antarctica for years on end. How on earth is that possible for humankinds that are so fragile? We've mastered that kind of stuff, so now we can return to what Eden looks like and basically recreate a climate, like a decent climate anywhere. And that stems from knowledge of the past. I didn't invent electricity, and neither did you. And so a person like this, Carl Jung, and I've only gotten in the first chapter, so this is not going to be too long of a review. He starts quoting Isaiah. The spirit of death have subjugated all pride and arrogance to the power of judgment. What he's so far going into, that what I see, is your relationship with the soul. And he makes a very clean point at the beginning of the book. He's like, this is not your God that I'm talking to. It's kind of like an allegorical sense of him understanding the collective unconscious, is the way he puts it. And more of that is written in his other literature, but this one's significant because it was unreleased. So it's like like a new baseball card you found 40 years after it came out. It's like a gem in psychology. And this guy was very much into the analytics of psychology, and him and Freud really pioneered the way to understanding how the human mind works. And he really puts an emphasis on religious psychological development, because as religious communities developed, they would alter the way you think. They had to. So was your community one of sacrifice? Was your community one of appeasement? Was it one of works, extreme works? Was it one of honoring your father and mother? What was the whole culture about, and what are the cultural norms that were common in every single one of them? And he studied a lot of this stuff, and so he also studied the part within. I'm just going to read one little part here in the introduction, just 2 paragraphs, and then I'll be done. And I'm going to read more of this and probably revisit it next Tuesday, because there's a lot to this. This is just in the introduction, talking a little bit about the preface of Carl Jung, of what led up to this book. In a series of articles from 1912, Jung's friend and colleague Alphonse Mader argued that dreams had a function other than wish fulfillment, which was a balancing or compensatory function. Dreams were attempts to solve the individual's moral conflict. As such, they did not merely point to the past, but also prepared the way for the future. Mader was developing Flournoy's view of the subconscious creative imagination. Jung was working along similar lines and adopted Mader's position. For Jung and Mader, this alteration of the conception of the dream brought with it an alteration of all other phenomena associated with the unconscious. It was prefaced in the 1952 revision of Transformations and Symbols of the Libido. Jung wrote that the work was written in 1911, when he was 36. His time is a critical one, for it marks the beginning of the second half of life, when a metanoia, a mental transformation, not infrequently occurs. He added then that he was conscious of the loss of his collaboration with Freud and was indebted to the support of his wife. After completing the work, he realized the significance of what it meant to live without myth. One without myth, this is quoting him, is like one uprooted, having no true link either with the past or with the ancestral life which continues within him, or yet with contemporary human society. So that rings true to me, and it rings true to the stuff I'm trying to bring to this channel, the concept of myth and story and how significant it is, and what story you are telling yourself, and what story you are currently in relation to other people. And I think that's extremely significant. So as I go through this, and as I discover a little bit more about what he was talking about back then, and how it relates to the life that we live now, I'm going to try to share that with you. And this book might take me a while. The only other book I couldn't read in like a week was Jordan Peterson's Maps of Meaning, because that should have been like 6 books. There was so much information in there, so much just to wrap your head around. But anyway, as we continue on, as you keep searching for the hero's journey and what that looks like in your relationship with the soul and the subconscious, check out this video up here that YouTube recommends, and we can keep going down this rabbit hole as long as it goes.